I need ID from both of you right now.
For what?
Because you're in a restricted area.
Restricted to residents. We live here. This is the gate credential.
Ma'am, I'm talking to him.
You came up like we're doing something wrong. What exactly is this?
Possible trespassing.
Trespassing?
Improve it. Resin tags on the windshield. Gate
on my wife's phone.
He picked the wrong family to intimidate. A patrol officer rolled into a private residential park, saw a black family unloading food and toys near a picnic table, and decided they didn't belong there. He pushed it into a detention before he checked a single basic fact. What he didn't know was that the family he was pressuring had a direct line to his own supervisor, and that supervisor was already heading to the scene. That's what made this one different. Not rumor, not half a story. A clean abuse of power case with cameras, dispatch audio, gate access records, and Bodycam all backing the same timeline. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if you follow stories about authority, getting checked with facts instead of excuses, like the video and subscribe. This happened inside a gated HOA community outside a growing suburb. The park sat behind a coded entry gate and was reserved for residents and their guests. The signs at the entrance said that plainly. The gate logs tracked access. Cameras covered the entrance, the parking area, and most of the common space. It wasn't public property, and that point ended up mattering more than anything else. The family at the center of it was the Brooks family. Nia Brooks had come to the park with her husband Andre, their 2 kids, and a few bags for a late afternoon cookout. They weren't sneaking around. They weren't near anybody's house. They were at one of the picnic areas residents used all the time. They had entered through the gate legally, parked in the right area, and started setting up. Officer Ryan Kessler rolled in a few minutes later. Kessler had a pattern. He liked command more than he liked facts. On calls where the answer wasn't obvious, he often acted first and corrected later, which is a dangerous habit in police work. Most of the time, that kind of officer gets away with it because regular people don't know the rules well enough to push back, or they know the rules and decide it's not worth the trouble. Nia Brooks was not built like that. Kessler got out of his unit and moved toward the family, like he had already decided what this was. He asked what they were doing there, then turned the contact aggressive almost immediately. He said the area was restricted. Nia explained that yes, it was restricted, which was why residents used a gate code to enter. Andre pointed to the resident access tag on the windshield and started to show the digital gate credential on his phone. Kessler didn't slow down. He kept pressing the same point as if they hadn't answered him. He wanted ID. He wanted proof they belonged there. He wanted it on his terms, in his order, with everybody responding the way he expected. That's where the stop went bad. Nia gave him the street name inside the community. Andre told him which building they were connected to. The access tag was right there on the vehicle. The phone showed resident entry credentials. All of that should have led to a basic verification. Instead, Kessler treated each answer like a challenge to his authority. He told them they were being detained while he investigated possible trespassing. That was the first major overreach. He was in a private resident-only area with people who had already shown multiple signs they had lawful access, and he still pushed forward as if the detention itself would force the truth out. It was backwards policing. He should have verified first. He chose control first. The kids picked up on the tone right away. One stopped near the playground and came back toward the table. The other stayed close to Nia. That changed the whole feel of the scene. It wasn't just a bad stop anymore. It was a uniformed officer creating fear in front of children over something he could have resolved in minutes. Andre stayed measured. He tried to keep the exchange narrow and practical. Nia did something smarter. She took out her phone and started recording. That mattered a lot. Kessler noticed it and got even more rigid. He warned her about interfering, even though she was standing back and documenting from her own spot. She kept recording. She also kept her tone controlled, which made the footage stronger. There was no shouting match to hide behind later, no mutual chaos. The video showed one side trying to explain and one side refusing to process anything that didn't fit the suspicion he had already decided on. Kessler radioed dispatch and described the contact as suspicious people in a restricted private area. That phrasing shaped the call in real time. It made the situation sound cleaner for him than it looked on camera. Then he asked for backup. That turned out to be the mistake that ended him. Before backup was even assigned, Nia had already texted her brother-in-law, Sergeant David Hale. She didn't do it to pull rank. She did it because the stop had crossed out of normal police contact and into something that looked personal, sloppy, and dangerous. Hale was on duty nearby. He saw the message, heard the radio traffic, and understood fast that one of his officers was building a bad scene. Back at the park, Kessler kept pushing. He told Andre to move away from the table and stand near the SUV. He told Nia to stay where she was. He acted like ordinary movement inside their own gathering was suspicious. Every choice he made showed the same thing. He didn't want clarification. He wanted compliance first, explanation later. Then he said the line that changed the whole case. He remarked that people always had a story ready when they got caught somewhere they weren't supposed to be. That told everybody exactly how he was seeing them. Not as residents to verify. Not as a family in a private park. As people he had already placed on the wrong side of the line before he checked the facts. That one statement later mattered inside the investigation because it exposed the mindset behind everything that came before and after it. Nia didn't take the bait. She kept filming. Andre kept his hands visible and stayed calm because he understood the risk. Kessler was in that dangerous stage where an officer starts defending his first bad decision by stacking more bad decisions on top of it. Then the backup unit came through the gate. Kessler turned toward it, expecting support. Sergeant David Hale stepped out, looked across the park, and recognized the family immediately. Nia was his wife's sister. Andre was holding himself together in front of his kids. The phone was recording. Kessler was standing there with detention language already used, a weak trespass theory, and no clean explanation for why he had ignored the access indicators right in front of him. That was the second everything changed. Kessler saw Hale's face and understood right there that he had walked himself into the worst possible version of this stop. Not because he had detained the wrong people by accident, because he had done it carelessly, on camera, inside a private residential space. And now his own sergeant was looking at the whole mess in real time. Sergeant David Hale did not need a long briefing. He looked at Nia, looked at Andre, looked at the kids. Then he looked at Officer Ryan Kessler standing there, like he still had control of the scene. Hale already had enough in front of him to know this was bad. The phone was up. The gate was behind them. The resident tag was on the SUV. His own family was being treated like intruders in a park they had lawful access to. Kessler started talking first. He tried to frame it as a suspicious person stop inside a restricted area. He said he was still sorting out whether they belonged there. He made it sound procedural, clean, reasonable. Hale cut straight through that. He asked what legal basis Kessler had for detention after being shown resident access indicators. He asked whether dispatch had confirmed any trespass complaint tied to that family. He asked whether the HOA had requested enforcement action. He asked whether Kessler had verified the address, the gate credential, or the vehicle access tag before escalating the stop. Kessler didn't have good answers because there weren't any. That's what made the scene so ugly. He wasn't trapped by some complicated legal issue. He had ignored the easy checks. He had skipped the boring, correct part of the job and gone right to pressure. Officers do that when they want control more than accuracy. Hale then turned to Nia and Andre, got a fast confirmation of what had happened, and looked back at Kessler. By then, the picture was complete. Kessler had approached aggressively. He had used detention language. He had threatened arrest. He had treated clear signs of lawful access like they meant nothing. He had done all of that in front of 2 children and on camera. That ended it. Hale told Kessler to step away from the family and stop speaking to them. Not suggest. Told him. Kessler froze for a second, then tried one more time to defend himself. He started talking about officer safety, restricted spaces, and suspicious behavior. It sounded weak because it was weak. Hale wasn't buying any of it. He told him again to step back and keep quiet. The power shift was instant. A minute earlier, Kessler had been trying to run the entire scene through force of tone. Now he was standing there, getting checked by the one person on scene who outranked him, knew policy cold, and had zero reason to protect sloppy police work. That's the part people notice in footage like this. Aggressive officers usually look invincible right up until someone with actual authority makes them explain themselves. Hale asked to see the body cam status. It was active. Good for the case, bad for Kessler. He asked dispatch over the radio to note a supervisory intervention and preserve all related communications. He requested another unit not for backup now, but for scene handling and evidence control. That mattered. Hale wasn't just angry. He was already building the record correctly. Then came the part that turned this from a bad stop into a career-ending event. Hale relieved Kessler of field authority on the spot. Not a movie-style firing. Realer than that. Worse, too. He ordered Kessler out of enforcement contact for the rest of the shift. He took him off the scene. He directed the incoming unit to assume control and maintain separation. He told Kessler he would not initiate any more stops, speak to the family again, or write the primary version of the incident. He also ordered preservation of the body cam file, the dispatch traffic, and any notes tied to the contact. In plain terms, Kessler had just lost his power right there in public. And Hale didn't stop there. Kessler had been carrying corporal-style field responsibility that shift, a small status bump tied to staffing coverage. Hale removed it immediately. No more acting senior role, no more scene command, no more pretending experience covered for judgment. In front of another unit, in front of the family, with the whole thing being recorded, Kessler got stripped back to exactly what he had earned in that moment. No discretion, no trust, no room to spin it. That hit harder than yelling ever would have. Hale kept his voice controlled. That made it sting. He told Kessler he had detained lawful occupants in a private residential area without proper verification, escalated after being presented with access indicators, and kept pushing after the stop should have been over. He told him he had damaged public trust, exposed the department to liability, and created a record that would now go straight to review. Kessler tried to speak again. Hale shut that down too. He told him this was no longer a debate. It was an investigation. That line mattered because it marked the exact point where Kessler stopped being the officer shaping the contact and became the subject of it. The incoming officer arrived and took over the scene perimeter. Hale made sure the family was no longer being detained in any form. He apologized clearly. No vague language, no department speak. He told them the stop should not have gone that way. He told them the footage and records would be preserved. He also made it clear that if they filed a formal complaint, it would attach to a supervisor-initiated review already in motion. That was smart. It showed them this wasn't going to disappear into some locked drawer, unless they fought for 6 months. Andre finally got room to breathe. Nia kept recording. Good call again. The strongest parts of these cases usually come after the confrontation, when everybody expects the camera to go down and the institution to close ranks. Hale did the opposite. He acted like a supervisor who understood that transparency was the only move left. Then he asked for HOA security contact information and gate log preservation. Another smart move. Because once you know a stop is rotten, you lock down every neutral source before somebody can't locate it later. The gate entry records would show lawful access. The camera footage would show how the family entered and behaved before Kessler arrived. Dispatch audio would show how he framed the stop. His own body cam would show the rest. He had built the case against himself from 4 different angles. Kessler knew it too. People like him usually keep pushing until the second the paperwork becomes real. Then the attitude changes. Fast. Not because they suddenly understand the public harm, because they finally understand personal consequences. Kessler had that look now. Still stiff. Still trying to hold on to some pride. But he knew the stop was dead. The justification was dead, and his sergeant was not going to rescue him. Before leaving the scene, Hale gave him one final instruction. He told him to return to station under supervision, remain available for statement, and not discuss the contact with anyone except command staff or investigators. Standard order. Serious meaning. Kessler got back into his unit with no control left, no authority on scene, no good story. Just a body cam full of bad judgment and a supervisor who had seen enough. As for the family, the worst of it was over, but the damage had already been done. Their kids had watched a uniformed officer treat their parents like suspects in a place they had every right to be. That doesn't disappear because a sergeant shows up and fixes the paperwork. That kind of thing stays with people. That's why stops like this matter even when nobody gets arrested. The abuse is in the humiliation, the threat, the message. You do not belong until I say so. That was Kessler's whole approach, and it collapsed the second somebody serious measured it against facts. Hale's last comment at the park was simple. He told Kessler that authority did not excuse ignoring the law. That was the end of the roadside power trip. The paper trail was just getting started. After the park incident, the real damage started. Sergeant David Hale filed the first report that same night. He laid it out plainly. Officer Ryan Kessler had detained a family inside a private residential park without doing basic verification. He had ignored clear signs that they belonged there. He had threatened arrest, pushed the stop in front of two children, and kept going after the situation should have ended. Hale also included Kessler's remark about people always having a story ready when they got caught somewhere they didn't belong. That line mattered because it showed how he had judged the family before he checked the facts. By the next morning, the department had everything it needed. There was Kessler's body camera. There was Nia Brooks's phone video. There was dispatch audio. There were gate records and security cameras from the Homeowners Association, or HOA. All of it pointed in the same direction. The gate logs showed the Brooks family had entered legally. The video showed them acting normally before Kessler arrived. The body cam showed him turning a routine contact into a detention. The radio traffic showed how he dressed it up as suspicious activity instead of what it really was, a bad stop built on assumptions. That's why Internal Affairs moved quickly in early 2026. Investigators reviewed the footage, interviewed the family, checked Kessler's report, and started looking at his past contacts. That's where the case got worse for him. This wasn't the first time he had escalated first and sorted facts out later. Earlier complaints had not gone far. Some people never filed, some had no video, some gave up because they assumed the department would protect him. This time there was too much evidence, and his record came back with it. The violations stacked up fast. Unlawful detention, harassment, abuse of police authority, failure to de-escalate, improper trespass enforcement on private residential property, misleading dispatch framing, conduct that damaged public trust. That list alone put him in serious trouble. The body cam made it worse because it showed he had chances to fix the stop and refused to take them. The Brooks family hired a civil rights lawyer within days. That was the right move. Their attorney sent preservation notices immediately. No footage could disappear. No audio could go missing. No one could later claim records were incomplete. Every part of that stop got locked down. Then came the civil claim. The argument was simple and strong. A black family with lawful access to a private residential park had been treated like trespassers by an officer who ignored obvious proof, escalated without cause, and used detention as pressure instead of doing his job correctly. The harm was not just inconvenience. It was humiliation, fear, and the message sent to those children while their parents were being treated like they did not belong in their own community. The city's lawyers saw the problem right away. Kessler had no clean defense. He tried anyway. He said he was being cautious. He said restricted access areas required extra attention. He said he was trying to confirm whether the family had lawful entry. That argument fell apart because he had easy ways to confirm it from the start. The resident tag was visible. The gate credential was available. The address could have been checked. Instead of verifying first, he detained first. That decision sat at the center of the whole case. While Kessler tried to save himself, Hale's conduct went the other way. Investigators found that Hale had acted properly once he arrived. He ended the detention, removed Kessler from field authority, preserved the evidence, and documented the stop without trying to protect his officer. That mattered. A lot of departments talk about integrity. Hale actually showed it. He didn't circle the wagons. He shut the scene down and made sure the records stayed clean. A few weeks later, Internal Affairs finished the investigation. The recommendation was termination. No soft landing, no quiet transfer, no extra training package to calm the public down. Termination. The department accepted it. Kessler was fired and referred for state certification review. That part followed him beyond that agency. Once an officer is tied to unlawful detention and a dishonest version of events, other departments notice. Prosecutors notice too. His name became a liability, and that usually ends a law enforcement career. It did here. The civil case ended in a settlement. The amount stayed confidential, but the Brooks family received compensation, and the department agreed to policy changes. That said enough. Agencies don't rewrite procedures unless they know the case against them is strong. Those changes were specific. Officers now had to verify resident access indicators before using trespass detention inside gated residential communities unless there was a real safety threat. That included checking tags, gate logs, access credentials, and address information. Supervisors had to review disputed private property stops more closely. Dispatch wording also came under review, because officers should not be able to turn weak assumptions into stronger calls just by how they describe them on the radio. That part matters beyond this one story. Bad police work often starts small. A tone, a label, an officer deciding he already knows who belongs and who doesn't. Then the stop grows around that bad first decision. Kessler did exactly that, and cameras caught him doing it. For the Brooks family, there was some justice, but not a clean ending. They were validated. The department admitted the stop had gone wrong. They got compensation. They got policy change. But their kids still saw a uniformed officer treat their parents like intruders in a place where they had every right to be. That doesn't disappear because paperwork later comes out in their favor. Still, they handled it the right way. They stayed calm. They recorded. They did not give Kessler the angry reaction he was trying to pull out of them. They let the facts speak, and the facts hit hard. And Hale did what a real supervisor is supposed to do. He did not protect the badge over the truth. He protected the truth first. That's leadership. Rare enough that people remember it when they see it. In the end, this case became a warning inside the department and a lesson outside it. One officer tried to force authority where he had no legal ground. He picked a family he thought he could push around. Instead, he created a case with witnesses, video, records, legal exposure, and a supervisor who refused to cover for him. That decision cost him his authority, his job, and his future in law enforcement. What would you have done in that situation? Have you ever seen someone in authority keep pushing after the facts were already clear? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share the story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this.
I'm not buying that. Step away from the vehicle.
I already told you what this is. Federal assignment. You can verify it.
That plate doesn't come back right.
Because it's not a regular public registration. Call the contact chain I gave
You
you.
think flashing a badge wallet settles this?
No, verification
As
settles.
far as I'm concerned, this could be a stolen car with
Then
fake
slow
paper.
down and check it before you do something.
A county sheriff thought he had caught a car thief. He was wrong. The driver was a black FBI agent in a federal vehicle, and the sheriff ignored every chance to verify it before turning the stop into a public arrest. That decision didn't just blow up the scene on the roadside. It opened the door to a federal investigation that would later tear through his office. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you follow stories about abuse of power getting exposed by Bodycam, dispatch audio, and hard evidence, like the video and subscribe. This started with Special Agent Jordan Cole and Sheriff Wade Garrison. Cole had worked federal cases long enough to know how traffic stops could go. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't loud. He didn't play games with local police. That night, he was driving a bureau-issued SUV back through Pine County after a work assignment connected to an active investigation. The vehicle wasn't flashy. That was the point. It looked like a clean, late-model civilian SUV with low-profile government registration tied to federal use. Garrison had been sheriff for years. Small county, strong local image. He liked being the final word in his jurisdiction. Deputies under him were used to following his lead, even when his judgment got ahead of the facts. That mattered later, because this stop didn't go bad from confusion alone. It went bad because Garrison decided very early that he wasn't going to be corrected. The initial reason for the stop looked ordinary on paper. Suspicious vehicle, registration issue, possible mismatch. Something vague enough to justify lights in a county where people rarely challenged the sheriff's office. Cole pulled over without delay. No chase, no drama. From there, it should have been simple. Cole gave identification. He presented federal credentials. He explained that the SUV was assigned for bureau use and that local databases didn't always return clean, public-facing information on those vehicles. He also gave Garrison the path to verify everything through the proper federal contact chain. That should have slowed the stop down and shifted it into confirmation mode. It didn't. Garrison looked at the credentials and immediately treated them like a story instead of evidence. Not cautiously, dismissively. He didn't act like a man trying to figure out whether the ID was real. He acted like a man who had already decided it wasn't. That was the first serious mistake. Plenty of officers verify credentials they haven't seen before. That part isn't the issue. The issue is how he handled it. He skipped straight past neutral procedure and went into accusation. He treated the badge wallet as a prop. He talked to Cole like the entire scene had already been solved. Bodycam later became a huge problem for him because it showed the change in tone almost immediately. He wasn't weighing possibilities. He was building a case out loud before dispatch finished doing its job. Cole stayed controlled. That helped him later. He kept his hands visible. He answered what he needed to answer. He didn't argue on the roadside because he understood what too many people learned the hard way. Once an officer turns a stop personal, winning the argument in the moment usually isn't the goal. Surviving the moment is. Garrison didn't see calm professionalism. He saw resistance because that's what he wanted to see. He started focusing on the SUV itself. He treated the registration issue as proof that the vehicle had to be stolen. That jumped way past the evidence. A mismatch can mean a lot of things. Clerical delay, restricted listing, interagency registration, database limitation. It does not automatically mean grand theft auto. Garrison went there anyway. Dispatch then gave him an easy exit. The returns didn't support a clean, stolen vehicle theory. They showed irregularity, yes, but not confirmation. Then another piece came in. The federal identification Cole had provided began matching an actual employee profile. Again, not the kind of thing that should make a reasonable officer more aggressive. It should make him more careful. Garrison did the opposite. He talked over the radio. He brushed past partial confirmation because it interfered with the version of events he'd already committed himself to. That was the second serious mistake. Once that happened, this stopped being about uncertainty. It became about ego. He ordered Cole out of the SUV. Cole complied. That detail mattered. No resistance, no sudden movement, no physical challenge. He stepped out, followed commands, and kept trying to direct the stop toward verification. He explained again that the vehicle was federally assigned. He pointed Garrison back toward the same basic option any competent officer would have taken at that stage. Confirm the assignment through the proper channels. Garrison wasn't interested in slowing down. He was interested in winning the scene. Secondary units began arriving. That changed the temperature right away. More deputies meant more eyes, more body cams, more witnesses, and more pressure on Garrison to either correct himself or go all in. He chose the second option. Deputy Erin Vale was one of the first to realize the stop felt wrong. She saw the federal credentials. She heard enough of the dispatch traffic to know the sheriff was moving faster than the evidence. She also saw Cole's behavior. He wasn't acting like a man improvising his identity under pressure. He was acting like someone who had already lived through enough roadside encounters to know exactly how careful he needed to be. Vale didn't take over. She couldn't. Not with Garrison running the stop, but her hesitation showed. Another deputy, Noah Pike, looked unsure too once the radio traffic got more specific. Neither one wanted to openly challenge the sheriff on the shoulder of a public road. That's how bad departments trap decent people. The rank structure does the silencing for them. Garrison pushed past all of it. He told the deputies to cuff Cole. That was the moment this went from bad judgment to a career-ending event. A sheriff had a compliant black FBI agent on the side of the road, with valid federal credentials already presented, dispatch already signaling that the story didn't add up the way he claimed, and additional officers already showing signs that they knew this was getting out of hand. He still moved to handcuffs. It looked terrible on camera, because there was no clean excuse left by then. He'd had off-ramps, several. He ignored every one. Cole didn't resist the cuffs. He made the smart choice. He preserved the record. He kept telling them the same thing in the same controlled way: federal assignment, federal vehicle, federal verification. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was documenting the disaster in real time by staying steady, while Garrison got more rigid and more defensive. That's when the rest of the deputies really started to understand the scale of the mistake. You could hear it in the slower movements, the broken rhythm, the way nobody except Garrison sounded certain anymore. He was still talking like he had a major arrest. The scene around him no longer matched that confidence. Then the final problem started forming in the background. Someone on the federal side had been notified, not officially yet, not through a press release, not through a court filing, through the channels that matter first. An agent had been detained by a local sheriff after presenting credentials. A bureau vehicle had been called stolen without proper verification. Dispatch audio and Bodycam were already creating a time-stamped record of every bad decision. Garrison still thought he could manage it locally. That was his biggest mistake of the night. He thought this was a county stop with a county ending. It wasn't. By the time Cole stood on that roadside in handcuffs, watched by deputies who were no longer sure they were on the right side of the stop, the damage was already bigger than Pine County. The sheriff just hadn't realized it yet. The stop started falling apart when direct federal verification came in. Jordan Cole was who he said he was. The SUV was a valid federal vehicle. At that point, Wade Garrison had no real case left. He had a compliant FBI agent in handcuffs, valid credentials already shown, and radio traffic that never backed his stolen vehicle claim. Cole was uncuffed. Garrison didn't own the mistake. He tried to soften it. He treated it like a reasonable stop that got complicated. That didn't help him. The cameras already showed he had chances to verify first and chose escalation instead. Cole didn't argue. He left the scene, documented everything, and contacted his supervisors. That's when the real problem started. Inside the FBI, this wasn't treated like a minor misunderstanding. A local sheriff had detained an agent after being shown federal credentials and given a path to verify them. That triggered immediate review. Bodycam, dashcam, dispatch audio, stop reports, unit logs, and plate queries all became important. By the next day, Pine County was dealing with evidence preservation demands in the early stages of a civil rights inquiry. Then Garrison made it worse. Instead of stepping back, he tried to control the record. Reports were pushed through fast. Internal messaging started moving. Some of the paperwork leaned toward justifying the stop instead of honestly describing it. That became a serious problem once investigators compared the written reports to the actual footage. The differences stood out fast. Cole had identified himself. He had shown credentials. He had complied. Garrison had still treated him like a car thief. Some deputies started feeling the pressure right away. Aaron Vale and Noah Pike had both seen enough on scene to know the stop had gone too far. Neither one had stopped it, but neither looked eager to defend it either. That mattered because this case was already growing beyond one bad arrest. Federal investigators weren't just looking at the stop. They were looking at what happened after it. Who changed language in reports? Who accessed footage? Who tried to shape the story once they realized the sheriff had made a major mistake? Then word started leaking out. Local officials heard that the sheriff's office had rushed its internal version before federal investigators locked everything down. Reporters picked up that this might be more than a bad call. Now, the question wasn't only why Garrison arrested Cole, it was whether he tried to cover it up after. That changed the whole case. By the end of the week, Cole was free and back under federal protection. Garrison still had the badge, but he was no longer in control of what came next. Once the feds locked the evidence down, Wade Garrison's problem got bigger. Jordan Cole filed notice to preserve every piece of the stop, not just body cam, dispatch audio, plate checks, unit logs, report edits, supervisor messages. That forced the county to hold everything in place before anyone could clean it up further. Then the lawyers got involved. Cole's legal team didn't build the case around outrage. They built it around sequence. Credentials shown, verification offered, dispatch failing to confirm theft, handcuffs anyway. That sequence was hard to defend. Worse for Garrison, it got even uglier when the attorneys started pulling older stop data from the department. That's where the patterns started showing. Black drivers had been searched more often, detained longer, written up on thinner justification. Some stops ended with nothing. Some complaints went nowhere. A few deputies had raised concerns before, but the office buried them or treated them like attitude problems. Now those old complaints mattered. Federal investigators weren't looking at Garrison as one sheriff who had a bad night. They were looking at whether his office had been running on the same bias for years. Once that happens, every past shortcut becomes evidence. The department started splitting. Some deputies stayed loyal and repeated Garrison's line that the stop had been reasonable until full confirmation came in. Others started backing away, quiet at first, then more clearly in interviews. They knew the video was bad. They knew dispatch didn't support him. And they knew nobody wanted to be the one left defending a lie under oath. That's when the cover-up angle got teeth. Investigators found report language that looked coordinated. Nothing dramatic on its face. Just too polished, too similar, too obviously shaped after the fact. Access logs also showed who reviewed footage before final narratives got filed. That's a major problem when the written version starts sounding less like memory and more like damage control. County officials saw where it was going and started distancing themselves. No one wanted to go down with Garrison over a stop that was already impossible to explain cleanly. Public support around him got thinner, meetings got quieter, statements got cautious. He still had the title, but he was losing the room. Cole, on the other side, got stronger every week. His record stayed clean. His conduct during the stop helped him. Calm, compliant, consistent. Garrison had gambled on making Cole look suspicious. The footage did the opposite. It made Cole look professional and made the sheriff look reckless. By the time depositions started coming together, the case was no longer just about one roadside arrest. It was about whether Wade Garrison's office had been operating like rules were optional until somebody with federal backing forced the issue. That was the point where this stopped looking survivable for him. The final collapse came in stages, then all at once. By 2026, Wade Garrison was no longer fighting one bad stop. He was fighting the stop, the reports, the internal handling. and the pattern evidence that came out after Jordan Cole sued. The court stripped away Garrison's best shield first. Qualified immunity didn't hold. The judge looked at the facts the same way everyone else eventually had to. Cole identified himself. He showed federal credentials. He gave Garrison a clear path to verify them. Dispatch never confirmed a stolen vehicle. Garrison still pushed the stop into handcuffs. That wasn't a close call anymore. Once that ruling landed, the rest got worse. The civil case moved forward with real force. Discovery exposed older complaints, uneven stop patterns, and internal practices that made the sheriff's office look less like a discipline department and more like a shop run on habit, ego, and selective enforcement. Then the obstruction issues hit. Investigators focused on report coordination, post-incident messaging, and how the office handled evidence after federal notice came in. That ended careers. A few supervisors resigned before they were forced out. Others got suspended, then interviewed again when the timeline tightened around them. Garrison lost the political protection he'd counted on. County officials had no reason left to stand near him. He became expensive, toxic, and impossible to defend in public. Then came the structural hit. The county's sheriff's department was stripped of core policing authority and pushed under state-managed oversight while the office was reorganized. Some functions were absorbed, some were reassigned. Some people never got their jobs back. For a department that had acted like nobody could touch it, that was the real humiliation. It didn't just lose a case, it lost control. Garrison's career was finished by then. Not damaged, finished. He lost the badge, the office, and whatever local legend he thought he had built. The footage followed him. The rulings followed him. The federal findings followed him. That's the part people like him never plan for. They think power protects them forever. It usually protects them right up until the record gets too clean to spin. Cole came out of it in a very different position. His professional record was cleared completely. The claim that he had done anything suspicious collapsed under evidence almost immediately once outside review took over. He later won a major settlement against the county, enough to make every local official understand what Garrison's ego had really cost. More important than the money, the case confirmed what Cole had said from the beginning. He had done his job. Garrison had abused his. And the case didn't stay local. Training standards changed. Verification procedures got tightened. More departments were forced to review how officers handled federal credentials, restricted vehicle registrations, and cross-agency contacts during roadside stops. Civil rights lawyers started citing the case as a clean example of what happens when an officer skips procedure, makes race part of the decision whether he admits it or not, and then tries to protect himself by shaping the paperwork after. That's why this story mattered. Not because one sheriff embarrassed himself on camera. That happens all the time. This mattered because the evidence held. The timeline held. The excuses didn't. And once the facts got outside his office, Wade Garrison learned the hard way that local power stops working when every bad decision is recorded, preserved, and reviewed by people who don't work for you. Jordan Cole didn't beat him by making a scene. He beat him by staying steady long enough for the truth to do the damage. That's the whole story. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in Cole's position once Garrison ignored the credentials and started escalating? And have you ever seen a situation where somebody in authority ruined themselves simply because they refused to admit they were wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share the story with somebody who'd understand it. And subscribe for more stories like this.
Step away from the car right now.
I'm a medic. She's unstable. Give me a second.
I said back away.
No, listen to me. She's fading. I need to keep pressure here.
You don't ignore orders on my
Man,
scene.
help me. Don't stop me. Ma'am, stay with me. Keep looking at me. Don't close your eyes.
Move now.
Do not pull me right now. She needs
You're
airway
interfering.
support. I'm the one keeping her breathing.
Can a single arrest destroy a decorated career? When a patrolman interfered with a Navy SEAL medic during a life-or-death emergency, it set off a chain reaction no one saw coming. You won't believe the evidence investigators uncovered after they tore through the footage, the reports, and the witness statements. What started on the shoulder of a wet Virginia highway didn't end as a routine arrest. It ended as a career collapse. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you follow stories about abuse of power, real consequences, and people who stay sharp when somebody else loses control, hit like and subscribe. This one's centered on Chief Hospital Corpsman Darius Cole, a Black Navy SEAL medic with years inside the kind of environments where panic gets people killed. He wasn't loud, wasn't reckless. He was the kind of man who assessed first, moved second, and didn't waste words. That mattered because by the time this story started, a woman was bleeding on the pavement, traffic was backing up, and one patrolman was about to make the worst decision of his career. The trouble started just after sunset on a stretch of highway outside Virginia Beach. Roads were slick from earlier rain. Visibility was still decent, but the pavement had that greasy look that made every sudden stop dangerous. Two vehicles had collided hard near the right shoulder. One had spun half sideways. The other had its front end crushed in enough to tell anyone paying attention that this wasn't a minor fender bender. Cole had been driving home when he saw the wreck. He pulled over without hesitation, grabbed a compact trauma kit from the back of his vehicle, and moved in fast. Not rushed. Controlled. Big difference. A few bystanders had already stopped, but they were doing what most untrained people do at a bad crash. Standing too close. Talking too much. Looking at each other for answers nobody had. One woman had called 911 and kept saying the injured driver was fading. Another man kept trying to open a damaged door from the wrong angle and making things worse. Cole took over because somebody had to. He checked the scene, made sure there was no immediate fire risk, then focused on the victim in the worst shape. Lindsay Mercer, mid-40s, semi-conscious. She had visible facial trauma, a deep cut near the scalp line, and signs that worried him more than the bleeding did. Her breathing pattern looked wrong. Her attention drifted in and out. She wasn't tracking properly. That told him this could go south fast. He identified himself as a medic, told the bystanders exactly what he needed, and got them moving. One person directed traffic away from the shoulder. Another held a phone light steady. Another stayed on with dispatch and relayed what Cole found. That's how real scene control works. Not yelling, assignments. Within a minute, he had the victim positioned as safely as possible, pressure controlled on one wound, and his focus on keeping her airway stable while watching for spinal risk. He didn't know how long EMS would take. On roads like that, even a few minutes mattered. And this is where the whole thing turned. The first patrol unit arrived before fire rescue. That by itself wasn't unusual. A lot of accident scenes start with law enforcement securing traffic before medics fully take over. The problem wasn't the arrival. It was the read. Patrolman Brent Holloway stepped out of his cruiser and saw a black man in civilian clothes leaning into a damaged vehicle with blood on his hands and a medical kit open on the ground. Instead of taking 2 seconds to assess what was happening, he came in hot and wrong. He started issuing commands immediately. Step back. Move away from the vehicle. Don't touch anything else. He treated the scene like he had caught somebody interfering, not somebody keeping a victim alive. Cole looked up, kept one hand where it needed to be, and told him he was a Navy SEAL medic rendering emergency aid. He reported it cleanly, no attitude, no challenge, just facts, because facts should have solved this right there. They didn't. Holloway demanded compliance again. Cole responded the same way a disciplined medic would. He explained that the victim needed stabilization and that pulling him off in that moment could make her condition worse. He also said EMS was still en route and that he was maintaining care until they arrived. That should have been enough for any officer with basic judgment. It wasn't enough for Holloway. This was the first real sign of what investigators later focused on. The patrolman wasn't trying to understand the scene. He was trying to dominate it. Big difference. A competent officer arrives, identifies roles, secures the perimeter, and supports life safety. Holloway skipped that and went straight to control for control's sake. Bystanders noticed it too. Phones started to come up, quietly at first. People always sense when something stops looking normal. They could see the injured woman. They could see Cole working. They could hear the patrolman pushing harder than the situation called for. That changed the energy right away. Now there were witnesses watching not just the crash, but the officer. Cole kept working. He told the bystanders to stay calm and keep the victim talking if she could respond. He checked her breathing again. It had gotten weaker. He asked for an ETA from dispatch through one of the witnesses. He was still doing the job. Still focused. Holloway didn't like that. He moved closer and repeated that nobody was going to ignore his commands on his scene. That was the mindset, his scene, his authority, his ego. The injured woman was becoming secondary, and that's the part that later made the footage impossible to defend. Cole tried one more time to get through to him. He identified his training again, told him the victim was unstable, told him he'd step back when qualified responders physically took over. That was measured. Reasonable. Exactly what any sane person would want to hear from someone giving emergency care. Holloway treated it as defiance. He started pressing on identification, asking who Cole thought he was, demanding credentials in the middle of active treatment. Like this was a traffic stop and not a medical emergency. Cole told him where his identification was and why he wasn't taking his hands off the patient to dig for a wallet. Again, sensible. Again, wasted on the wrong man. By then, the phones were fully out. One bystander moved closer from the shoulder and said the medic had been there first and was helping. Another said the victim had nearly stopped responding before Cole stabilized her. Holloway shut that down too. He didn't want input. He wanted submission. That was the mistake. Not the last one, the first big one. Because now there was Bodycam running, multiple civilian recordings, and a growing group of witnesses seeing an officer choose a power struggle over obvious medical reality. Once that happens, a bad decision doesn't stay local. It travels. Cole leaned back in, checked the victim again, and adjusted his pressure placement as her breathing shifted. He told Holloway one more time that if he wanted to help, he needed to keep the scene clear and let medical care continue. Clean, direct, professional. Holloway stepped forward anyway. He reached down toward Cole's shoulder while the medic was still working over the victim. Patrolman Brent Holloway reached for Darius Cole's shoulder while Cole was still holding pressure and watching the injured woman's breathing. Cole told him he was in the middle of active medical care and that pulling him away could make her worse. He said it plainly. He did not raise his voice. He did not turn it into an argument. He just kept working and explained the risk. Holloway did not stop. He ordered Cole to step back immediately. Cole answered that the woman was unstable and needed a few more seconds before he could safely let go. That should have ended it. Any officer with common sense would have recognized what was happening, secured traffic, and let the trained medic do his job until fire rescue arrived. Holloway made it personal instead. He kept pressing on authority. He acted like Cole's calm tone was disrespect. He demanded identification right there, while Cole still had both hands occupied with the victim. Cole told him where his identification was and why he was not about to take his hands off an injured woman to reach into his pocket. That answer was reasonable. Holloway treated it like refusal. The people standing around could see exactly what was happening. They had already watched Cole take control of a messy crash scene and turn it into something organized. He had directed bystanders, protected the victim, and kept her from being moved the wrong way. Then Holloway arrived and started turning the whole scene into a power fight. That was when more phones came out. One woman filming from the shoulder said Cole had been the only person there who knew what he was doing. Another bystander said the victim had started fading before Cole stabilized her. Holloway shut them down too. He did not want information. He wanted compliance. Then he escalated again. He grabbed Cole harder and ordered him away from the vehicle. Cole tried to finish one critical step before moving. He was still focused on the woman. He kept explaining that she needed support and pressure maintained until paramedics took over. Holloway yanked him back anyway. The woman's body shifted when Cole was pulled off balance. A bystander shouted. Another person moved forward, then stopped when Holloway started threatening people at the edge of the scene. That was the moment the entire stop changed. Up to then, Holloway could still have claimed he misunderstood what he saw. The second he physically removed a medic from an injured woman who was actively being treated, that excuse started falling apart. Cole did not fight him. That mattered later. He did not swing, shove, or posture. He kept telling Holloway the same thing. The woman needed care. He kept trying to give medical information even while Holloway forced his arm behind his back. Holloway pushed him toward the shoulder, bent his wrist, and handcuffed him while the victim was still inside reach of the open trauma kit. That image did damage before any investigation even began. A trained black military medic on the roadside, hands behind his back, while the woman he had been helping was left without him for no good reason. People did not need legal analysis to understand how bad that looked. They could see it. And Holloway kept talking. His body camera captured the whole shift in tone. He dismissed Cole's military and medical background instead of checking it. He talked like nobody at the scene had the right to act unless he approved it first. He framed Cole as a problem because Cole had not instantly stepped aside when ordered. That was his whole logic. Not danger, not confusion, not safety. Obedience. That body camera footage later wrecked him. Cole stayed seated on the shoulder after Holloway cuffed him. He kept asking whether someone was maintaining the woman's airway and bleeding control. Even then, he was still focused on the victim. That is what made Holloway look even worse. Cole was not trying to save himself first. He was trying to get the officer to stop making the medical situation worse. Then fire rescue arrived. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz came in with her crew and saw the problem immediately. An injured woman was still in the vehicle, and the person in handcuffs next to the road had medical gloves on, blood on his hands, and a trauma kit open on the ground. That is not a hard scene to read. Paramedic Josh Levin went straight to the victim. Ruiz took one look at Cole, then at Holloway, and understood that somebody had interrupted active care. The response from the medical side was immediate. Levin picked up where Cole had been forced to stop. Ruiz started asking what happened. Holloway tried to present it as scene interference and failure to follow orders. That version did not hold up for even a minute. The bystanders were already speaking over each other, all telling the same story. Cole had stopped to help. Cole had identified himself as a medic. Cole had been treating the woman before Holloway arrived. Holloway had pulled him away anyway. Ruiz and Levin could see the treatment pattern for themselves, the way the victim had been positioned, the supplies laid out, the pressure controls set up. None of it looked random. None of it looked unsafe. It looked like a professional emergency care. Levin later stated that Cole's actions before the arrest were medically appropriate and likely helped to keep the woman from getting worse before emergency medical services took over. That statement became a major problem for Holloway later because it moved the case out of the area of simple bad judgment and into something more serious. He had not just been rude. He had interfered with necessary care. Cole sat there in handcuffs while trained responders finished the work he should have been allowed to continue. He still did not give Holloway what he seemed to want. No outburst, no threats, no dramatic scene. Just short answers and repeated concern for the patient. That also mattered. Bad officers often count on the other person losing control. It makes the paperwork easier. It gives them something to point to later. Holloway did not get that. He got a composed service member with a clean record, a roadside full of witnesses, and a body camera footage that did not match the story he was already starting to build in his head. The mood at the scene turned fast once the ambulance left. The crash itself was no longer the center of attention. The arrest was. People stayed behind to give names and statements. Several said they had the whole thing on video and would send it out that night. Holloway still acted like he could manage the narrative because he had the badge, the handcuffs, and the first report. He was wrong. Cole had the truth on camera. The bystanders had angles his body camera did not. The medical responders had professional opinions Holloway could not talk over. And once all of that left the roadside, the case stopped belonging to him. That night, Patrolman Brent Holloway wrote the first report. He claimed Darius Cole interfered with the scene, refused orders, and forced the arrest. He leaned on the usual wording: noncompliance, officer safety, obstruction. The problem was simple. The videos did not support him. By the end of the night, bystander clips were already online. People saw the same sequence in every version. A Black Navy SEAL medic stopped at a crash, treated an injured woman, identified himself, and got arrested while she still needed help. The department could not sit on it. The next morning, the case went to Internal Affairs Lieutenant Naomi Price. She pulled the full file right away: body camera video, civilian videos, dispatch audio, the written report, witness statements, fire rescue statements, use of force paperwork. Then she compared everything. That is where Holloway started sinking. His report described Cole like a disruptive civilian, creating problems at an active scene. The video showed the opposite. Cole was already treating the victim before Holloway arrived. He kept the bystanders organized. He identified himself as a medic more than once. He stayed focused on the victim the whole time. Holloway arrived and turned it into a control issue. The body camera hurt him badly. It showed Cole explaining why he could not stop treatment in that moment. It showed Holloway ignoring that explanation. It showed Holloway escalating fast instead of assessing the situation first. The civilian videos made it worse. One angle showed Cole working before the patrol car even stopped. Another showed bystanders telling Holloway that Cole was helping. Another caught the moment Holloway pulled him away from the victim. Taken together, the footage removed doubt. This was not confusion. It was bad judgment followed by force. Then the medical responders gave statements. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz stated that Cole had clearly been providing competent emergency care before fire rescue arrived. She said the scene showed organized treatment, not interference. Paramedic Josh Levin confirmed the same thing. He stated that Cole's actions were medically appropriate and that removing him when Holloway did created unnecessary risk for the victim. That changed the case. Now the issue is not just an aggressive arrest. Holloway had interrupted active care without a valid reason. Price then verified Cole's background: active duty, advanced medical training, clean military record, no conduct problem, no credibility issue. Nothing in his history helped Holloway. After that, Price reviewed department policy. She found several violations. Holloway failed to properly assess the scene before acting. He interfered with emergency aid. He used force on a nonviolent person. He failed to de-escalate. He made a detention that the evidence did not support. Then he wrote a report that did not match the video. That last part mattered a lot. Departments can sometimes explain bad judgment. They have a much harder time explaining video that contradicts an officer's report. The bystanders helped close the gap. Their statements matched on the key points. Cole arrived first. Cole gave aid. Cole identified himself. Holloway escalated. Holloway ignored the medical emergency and focused on control. Price also found that Holloway had prior complaints tied to attitude and escalation. Nothing as large as this case, but enough to show a pattern. He had been warned before about pushing situations too far. At first, the department placed him on administrative leave. That did not last. Once command staff reviewed the footage and responder statements, the case moved fast. The risk to the department was obvious. The facts were too clear. The videos were too public. The medical testimony was too strong. The recommendation changed from review to termination. That happened quicker than usual because there was no real defense left. Holloway did not make a hard decision in a chaotic moment. He made a bad decision, double down, used force, and then wrote it up in a way the evidence did not support. Darius Cole did not need to say much. He let the footage speak. He let the medical responders speak. He let Holloway's own body camera do the damage. By the second week, the department was no longer deciding whether Holloway had crossed the line. It was deciding how to cut him loose. The department fired Patrolman Brent Holloway before the month ended. The findings were clear. He interfered with emergency medical care, used force without proper cause, failed to de-escalate, and wrote a report that did not match the video. Then, the state took the next step. Holloway lost his law enforcement certification. That ended his career for good. He was not moving to another department. He was done. Darius Cole was fully cleared. The investigation confirmed he had done exactly what a trained medic should do. He stopped, treated the victim, identified himself, and stayed focused on her condition the entire time. Fire Captain Elena Ruiz and paramedic Josh Levin confirmed that his care was appropriate and that Holloway created unnecessary risk by pulling him away. After that, Cole filed a civil suit. The claims included unlawful detention, excessive force, civil rights violations, and obstruction of emergency aid. The case was not just about a bad arrest. It was about an officer using his authority to stop life-saving care for no valid reason. Lindsay Mercer survived. That helped. It did not excuse what Holloway did. Cole stayed on active duty and returned to service with his record intact. Holloway lost his badge, his certification, and his future in law enforcement. The case also forced changes. The department updated training for officers arriving first at medical scenes. The focus was simple. Assess first. Do not interfere with qualified medical aid unless there's a real safety threat. That is why this case hit so hard. Holloway thought he controlled the scene because he had the badge. He did not. The cameras, the witnesses, and the facts took control away from him. One bad arrest ended a career. What would you have done if you were standing there? Put it in the comments, share the story, and subscribe for more.
I asked you for ID.
And I asked for a legal reason.
You're acting suspicious.
Walking on the sidewalk?
Your attitude's not helping you.
Silence isn't a crime.
Turn around, hands behind your back.
You haven't told me what I did.
I'm not going back and forth with you.
That's
Turn
because
all
you
the way
don't have
around.
This patrol officer thought he had an easy stop. Instead, he turned a routine sidewalk contact into a career-ending mistake. He pressed a quiet pedestrian with no solid legal basis, ignored his partner's warning signs, and put handcuffs on a man he had not even identified. What he did not know was that the man standing in front of him was a police commissioner, Adrian Cross. Tell me where you're watching from. If you like stories about abuse of authority, body cam fallout, and real accountability, like the video and subscribe. This happened on a Thursday night just after 9:20 p.m. in a redeveloped downtown corridor lined with restaurants, office buildings, and city property. Officer Brandon Pike was in a marked unit with Officer Marissa Cole. They were assigned to high-visibility patrol in an area where command staff had been pushing for more proactive policing. More stops, more contacts, more officer presence. Pike noticed a man walking alone near a public plaza beside a city parking structure. Dark jacket, plain clothes, nothing in his hands. Normal pace. He was not matching a suspect description because there was no suspect description. Dispatch had not sent out a call about him. No one had flagged him. He was simply there, walking by himself. Pike decided to stop him anyway. Bodycam later showed Pike stepping out with the kind of tone officers use when they want control first and facts later. He immediately started questioning the man about where he was going and what he was doing in the area. The man stopped and turned towards him. He did not walk away. He did not raise his voice. He did not make sudden movements. He kept his hands visible and answered very little. That man was Commissioner Adrian Cross, though Pike did not know it. Cross had been appointed months earlier after the department took public heat over repeated complaints involving unlawful stops, aggressive detentions, and poor field supervision. He had spent most of his first year pushing retraining, stop documentation reforms, and tighter review of body cam footage. He knew what legal street stops looked like. He also knew this one was already going bad. Pike asked for identification. Cross did not hand it over. He also did not do anything Pike could honestly describe as threatening. He did not clench up, move in, curse, or posture. He stayed composed and gave Pike almost nothing. That was what got under Pike's skin. Some officers can handle a quiet citizen. Pike could not. He read silence as attitude. He treated the lack of cooperation like a personal challenge. The stop stopped being about public safety and started becoming about control. Cole picked up on it early. Her body cam mattered later because it showed she was tracking the same facts any trained officer should have been tracking. No report of a crime, no matching description, no visible threat, no movement suggesting a weapon, no behavior that clearly supported detention. Pike kept pushing. Dispatch checked in over the radio for status. Pike responded by calling it a suspicious person stop and describing the man as uncooperative. That wording would matter later because it made the encounter sound more justified than it was. Uncooperative became Pike's substitute for actual facts. Cross stayed calm. Then he asked the key question. He asked if he was being detained. That should have forced Pike to be clear. If the answer was no, the contact should have ended. If the answer was yes, Pike needed a lawful reason he could explain on camera. He did neither. He gave a vague answer and repeated the demand for ID. Cole tried to slow it down, not with an argument, just with the kind of quiet field cue partners use when they know a stop is getting shaky. Pike ignored her. A few people nearby started looking over. Pike noticed. His posture changed. He got stiffer, more performative. Once he felt observed, he stopped looking for a clean exit and started trying to win the encounter. Cross did not help him do that. He remained controlled and said very little. Pike had several chances to end the contact before it turned into misconduct. He passed every one of them. Then he escalated. He ordered Cross to turn around. Cole reacted right away. The body cam showed it. She knew this was moving into handcuffing without a clear crime, without a clear threat, and without basic identification even being established. Cross did not resist. He stayed still while Pike stepped behind him, took his wrists, and locked the cuffs on. That was the moment the stop went from questionable to indefensible. An unarmed man was now handcuffed on a public sidewalk. Pike had not identified a crime. He had not articulated a safety threat. He had not confirmed who the man was. He had built the entire stop on irritation, then turned that irritation into restraint. Cole then asked the question that showed how badly Pike had handled it. Did they even have ID yet? They did not. Pike had handcuffed first and planned to justify it after. Then he reached into Cross's pocket for the wallet. That was the moment his confidence started to disappear. Pike opened the wallet expecting a normal ID check. Instead, he found the department seal. He paused for a second, then pulled the card fully into view. Commissioner Adrian Cross. Name, photo, title, current credentials. That was the first moment the stop stopped belonging to him. Bodycam caught the change right away. Pike's posture dropped. His face changed. His voice lost the edge it had a few seconds earlier. Officers can fake confidence for a long time, but they usually cannot hide the exact second they realize they are exposed. Cole saw the ID too. She took half a step back and looked at Pike like she already knew this was over. Cross was still in cuffs. That detail mattered more than anything. Because by then the issue was not embarrassment. It was that Pike had already committed himself on camera. He had detained and handcuffed the police commissioner without a clear legal basis, without identifying a crime, and without getting control of his own decision-making at any point during the contact. Pike started trying to recover. He fumbled through the usual phrases. He acted like this was a misunderstanding, like the identification changed the problem. It did not. The problem was not who Cross was. The problem was what Pike had done before he knew. That is what made this so bad from a department standpoint. If Cross had been any ordinary resident, the stop still would have been a problem. The title just made it impossible to bury. Cole moved in first. She told Pike to take the cuffs off. Not later, not after more talking. Right then. Pike hesitated for a second. That second made him look even worse. He still had not fully let go of the idea that he could talk his way out of it. Then he finally uncuffed Cross and stepped back. Cross turned around, straightened his jacket, and took his wallet from Pike's hand. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a speech. He did what experienced command staff do when they know a scene is already documented and the damage is done. He kept his words short and precise. He told Pike that he had just detained a man without stating a lawful basis. He told him that silence was not a crime. He told him that the problem on that sidewalk was not confusion. It was judgment. That hit harder than yelling would have. Pike tried to explain. He talked about suspicious behavior. He talked about the non-compliance. He talked too much. None of it fixed the video. None of it fixed the timeline. The footage had already captured the sequence clearly. Pike made contact. He pushed for ID. He ignored weak grounds. He escalated. He cuffed first. He checked identity after. Cole stopped trying to protect him at that point. She started speaking in the clipped, careful way officers use when they know the conversation is no longer informal. She was protecting herself now, too. That happens fast in scenes like this. Once the legal risk becomes obvious, every officer on camera starts thinking about reports, interviews, and internal review. Cross then did something Pike had not even considered. He triggered a silent emergency alert from his department-issued device. He did not need to call dispatch in front of them. He did not need to announce who he wanted. The alert went straight where it needed to go. Command-level notification. Location attached. Pike did not understand what had happened at first. Cole did. Within minutes, radio traffic shifted. The tone changed. Dispatch got tighter, more direct. A supervisor was told to respond. Then another. Then command staff vehicles started moving. That is when Pike's situation went from bad stop to career event. Sergeant Nolan Mercer arrived first. He stepped out, took one look at Cross, then one look at Pike, and understood enough from the body language alone to know this was serious. Mercer did not start by asking Pike for his version. That tells you a lot. He asked Cross if he was all right. Cross answered briefly and told Mercer the stop needed to be treated as an unlawful detention review immediately. He said Bodycam needed to be preserved. Both units, full upload, no gaps, no informal report writing before command notification. Mercer agreed on the spot. Pike stood there silent for the first time all night. That silence looked very different on him. A second supervisor arrived. Then a black department SUV pulled up. Assistant Chief Dana Mercer stepped out with two command staff members behind her. Not rushing, not loud, just moving with the kind of direct focus that tells everyone on scene the issue has already gone above patrol level. By then, Pike had stopped trying to sound in control. Cross gave a short description of what happened. He kept it factual. Time, initial contact, demand for identification, vague detention language, handcuffing before confirming identity, no stated crime, no visible threat, no lawful basis explained. He did not need more than that. The footage would do the rest. Cole then gave her own short account. She did not try to cover for Pike. She confirmed she had concerns during the stop and had tried to slow it down. That statement mattered because it killed the idea that Pike had made a reasonable judgment call under pressure. His own partner had seen the problem while it was happening. Pike finally got asked for his explanation. He said Cross had been acting suspiciously. Mercer asked what specific crime he suspected. Pike did not have a clean answer. He said Cross was refusing to identify himself. Mercer asked what legal basis he had to require ID. Again, Pike had no clean answer. That is how careers come apart in real time. Not with some dramatic speech. With simple questions an officer should be able to answer and cannot. Cross then made the point that everyone there understood. He said this was exactly what the public had been complaining about. Officers turning non-compliance into suspicion, turning irritation into force, treating constitutional limits like obstacles instead of rules. No one on scene argued with that. Pike was separated from Cole and told not to discuss the incident further. Standard move. His body cam was tagged for immediate retention. Same with Cole's. Dispatch logs were locked. Street camera footage from the plaza and parking structure was requested before anyone could claim the scene was unclear. Cross did not stay long after that. He did not need to. He had seen enough. Before leaving, he looked at Pike one last time and told him the badge did not give him authority to punish people for refusing to make his job easier. That was the line Pike was going to hear again and again later. In review, in interviews, in internal affairs summaries, maybe even in court filings. Then Cross got into the command vehicle and left. Pike did not go back to patrol. Sergeant Mercer took his unit key, removed him from the shift, and told him to report to administrative review first thing in the morning. No more field contact that night, no more traffic stops, no more chances to talk himself deeper into it. By midnight, command staff had already flagged the incident for internal affairs. By morning, the footage was being treated like evidence. And once that happens, the officer usually stops controlling the story. The next morning, this was already an internal affairs case. They pulled both body cams, dispatch audio, cruiser location data, and city camera footage from the plaza. The timeline was simple. Officer Ryan Mercer made the stop without clearly tying the man to a crime. He pushed for ID. He kept the detention vague. He ignored his partner's concern. He used cuffs before confirming identity. That gave investigators a clean sequence to work with. Command staff reviewed the footage that morning. Internal Affairs Captain Daniel Sloan was there. So was Assistant Chief Vanessa Holt, a department lawyer, and 2 training supervisors. They watched the full stop once, then they watched it again in sections. The first issue was the start of the contact. Mercer had no strong reason for the stop. There was no call about the man, no matching suspect description, no behavior showing a crime in progress. He treated presence as suspicion and silence as a problem. The next issue was the detention question. When Commissioner Julian Tate asked if he was being detained, Mercer had to be clear. Either yes with a legal basis or no. He did neither. He stayed vague and kept demanding ID. That hurt him badly in review. Then they got to the handcuffing. That was the worst part of the footage. Tate was standing still, hands visible, no threat, no move toward Mercer, no sign of a weapon. Nothing on camera supported cuffs as a safety measure. One training supervisor said Mercer had used restraints to control the stop, not to manage danger. That went into the review summary. Officer Nina Vale, Mercer's partner, was interviewed before lunch. She said she had concerns during the stop. She said she did not see a clear crime or a clear safety threat. She admitted she tried to slow Mercer down but did not step in hard enough before he put the cuffs on. That statement mattered. It showed the problem was visible in real time, not just obvious afterward. Mercer came in later with a union representative. He tried to defend the stop by saying Tate acted suspicious and refused to identify himself. Internal Affairs kept the questions narrow. Captain Sloan asked what crime Mercer suspected when he started the stop. Mercer did not give a clear answer. Sloan asked what law allowed him to force identification under those facts. Again, no clear answer. Then Sloan asked what specific behavior justified handcuffs. Mercer said noncompliance. That answer did not help him. Noncompliance alone was not enough on that video. Tate was calm, stationary, unarmed. Mercer had no clean safety basis. By the end of the interview, Mercer had no solid defense left. That same afternoon, the department suspended him without pay. His badge powers were pulled. His gun and department gear were taken. His system access was cut. He was ordered not to contact Vale and not to discuss the case with anyone involved. The city's legal side moved at the same time. Commissioner Tate did not wave it off. He filed notice for a civil rights claim based on unlawful detention, false arrest, and constitutional violations under color of law. That changed everything for City Hall. This was not just one officer making one bad stop. The department already had a history of complaints about street detentions. That gave Tate's legal team room to argue pattern, training failure, and weak supervision. The footage leaked before the week ended. Once people saw it, the reaction was immediate. The video was easy to follow. A quiet man was stopped, pressured, cuffed, and then suddenly treated differently when the officer found out who he was. That was the part people locked onto. Mercer had one tone for a man he thought was just another pedestrian. Then he found the department ID and changed his whole posture. That made the case worse in public and inside the department. Community groups started speaking out within days. Civil rights lawyers said the footage matched what many residents had described for years. Local organizers asked for a review of past suspicious person stops. Reporters started digging into older complaints and settlement records. The union tried to defend Mercer by saying officers make fast decisions in uncertain situations. That did not land. The stop was not fast. It was not chaotic. The problem was on camera from the beginning. By Monday, Internal Affairs finished its first formal findings. They sustained violations for unlawful detention, improper use of restraints, failure to state reasonable suspicion, failure to de-escalate, and conduct unbecoming. Mercer was given notice that termination was being recommended. Vale was not cleared either. She was ordered into disciplinary review for failure to intervene more directly. Not the same level as Mercer, but still serious. The department was sending a message that seeing a bad stop and doing too little was also a problem. City lawyers then started looking at money. Tate knew department policy. He knew stop law. He knew exactly how Mercer had failed and exactly how to describe that failure. That made him a strong plaintiff and made the case dangerous for the city. The pressure spread beyond this one incident. After the footage came out, more people started filing complaints and asking for old Bodycam and stop records. Some said they had been treated the same way and never filed before because they assumed nothing would happen. That is how the case widened. By the end of the week, Mercer was facing termination, the city was preparing for a civil rights lawsuit, and the department was dealing with a bigger problem than one officer. The video showed how an officer acted when he thought the person in front of him had no status, no leverage, and no one coming for him. The department did not drag this out. Within weeks, Officer Ryan Mercer was fired. The finding was straightforward. He made a stop without solid grounds, treated silence like suspicious behavior, used cuffs without a clear safety reason, and tried to justify it after the fact. The department also sent the case to the state certification board, which meant Mercer was now facing the real chance of losing his ability to work as a police officer anywhere in the state. That part mattered more than the firing. A lot of officers get terminated and try to land somewhere else. Decertification closes that door. Officer Nina Vale kept her job, but she took a hit too. She was formally disciplined for failing to intervene hard enough before the cuffs went on. She got pulled from patrol, sent back through stop and detention training, and lost standing inside the department. Command staff made it clear that seeing a bad stop and offering weak hints was not enough. Commissioner Julian Tate did not bury the case. He filed the civil rights lawsuit and let it move. That decision changed the pressure on the city. This was no longer just an internal discipline matter. It became a public test of whether the department would actually hold itself to the same standard it claimed to impose on the street. The city tried to settle fast. That was expected. The video was bad. The timeline was worse. Tate's lawyers had a simple case: unlawful detention, false arrest, civil rights violations, weak supervision, and a department that had already been warned about stop problems before. The settlement talks stayed quiet at first, but the political damage was public. City council hearings got packed. Civil rights groups demanded stop data. Local reporters pulled old complaint records and found that Mercer had been named before in aggressive stop allegations, even if those earlier cases had never turned into this kind of disaster. That was another problem for the city. A bad stop is one thing. A bad stop by an officer with prior warning signs is much worse. Tate used the case to force policy changes fast. He ordered a rewrite of field stop rules in plain language. Officers now had to state the legal basis for a detention clearly and early. They also had to document specific facts, not attitude, silence, or refusal to answer questions. He added a second rule. If an officer used handcuffs during a non-violent investigative detention, a supervisor had to be notified immediately, not at the end of the shift. Right then, he added a third one. Failure to intervene became a bigger discipline issue, not a side note, its own violation. Then came the change that got the most attention inside the department. Tate approved AI-assisted Bodycam review. It was not there to replace supervisors or make arrest decisions. It was there to scan for patterns. Fast escalation, repeated interruptions, vague detention language, quick shifts from questioning to commands, the kind of markers that show up again and again in bad stops. A lot of officers hated that idea. Tate did not care. His point was simple. Supervisors had been saying for years that there was too much footage to review closely. That excuse was gone now. The public reaction stayed strong for months because the case was easy to understand. People were not trying to decode a chaotic fight or a split-second shooting. They saw a calm man stopped on a sidewalk, pressured for ID, put in cuffs, and then treated completely differently once the officer learned who he was. That was the whole story. Mercer did not respect the law. He respected rank. That is what damaged trust most. Community groups used the case to push for a stronger civilian oversight board. City leaders approved expanded review authority not long after. The board got better access to stop data, complaint trends, and Bodycam audit results. Not full control of discipline, but more visibility and more leverage than it had before. Tate also ordered an audit of suspicious person stops from the previous 18 months. That review found repeated use of vague language in reports, especially words like evasive, uncooperative, and suspicious, with little factual detail behind them. More officers ended up in retraining. A few ended up under formal review. So one stop changed more than Mercer's future. It changed reporting. It changed supervision. It changed how the department reviewed Bodycam. It changed how much room officers had to hide weak detentions behind loose wording. As for Mercer, his name became a warning inside the department. Not because he stopped the wrong man, because he showed exactly how he treated a man he thought had no power. That was the lesson Commissioner Tate kept repeating after the case. Rights do not depend on status. A stop does not become lawful because an officer feels challenged, and silence is not a crime just because it annoys the person with the badge. That is the whole reason this story hit so hard. If Tate had identified himself in the first 10 seconds, Mercer probably would have changed his tone